Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail, where you can in turn inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for all we're able to do in His name. Amen. I am your running host, Dean Thompson. As always, I am joined by Run for God founder Mitchell Hollis. And this week, we have a treat for you. We are switching it up and going to give you something a little bit different. We hope you enjoy it. What do we have for Mitchell?
Well, this week we're gonna preview review an interview that we did with Ryan Hall. For everybody out there who doesn't know who Ryan Hall is, he is the nation's fastest marathoner and half marathoner, and he just happens to be a very outspoken believer. So it's a great interview. We hope everybody enjoys it.
Absolutely. He talks about his childhood, some personal excellence situations, and kind of how his brain works a little bit. It's really interesting to get that peek into his brain. I think you'll enjoy that. And then Mitchell talks about some quotes that he's had that are directly related to that. The video has been broken into two parts. Mm-hmm. So we have part one that we'll do today, and next week we'll share with you the second part.
You know, a really cool thing about Ryan that we just found out yesterday, he is now a Run Club ambassador.
That is correct.
And so maybe we'll have him on one of these Facebook Lives you do on one Thursday night.
That would be awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe, yeah, that would be good. So, so you are part of the same club as a guy who is the fastest marathoner in the country.
An Olympic marathoner.
Isn't that awesome? That's
It's going to be cool to get inside his head a little bit to find out how an Olympic athlete, what makes them tick. Because I think we can all learn something from that.
No question. No question. So we'll take a break, and the interview will start on the other side of the break. But don't go anywhere, because once that break is over, we're going to talk a little bit about what was in that video. So this is our sponsor, J Radio, the world's greatest digital music platform.
As a Christian runner, you might find it hard to decide what to listen to while you run. If you are looking for positive and Christian music that will help you keep your pace, check out the Radioactive station on the new J Radio. We'll take care of picking the music so that you can concentrate on your run. Plus, you can count on us to make sure that the music is uplifting and encouraging. Check out jradio.com or download the app in your app store.
So I'm here with Ryan Hall, America's fastest marathoner and half marathoner. Ryan, thank you first of all for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Chattanooga for a race, I understand.
Yes, yeah, we were out here for an event and just ran a 5K this morning with all the kiddos, and it was super fun. So yeah, the kids were loving Chattanooga.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Well, let's just jump right into it. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. We've got a lot of instructors and students watching this that some may know you, some may know you better than others. So just tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah. So I grew up in a family of 5. I was in the middle of 5, actually, 1 sister and 4 brothers, and had an amazing Christian home that I was in, where my dad did an amazing job of leading us spiritually, doing Bible studies, and we're going to church and all that. But I wouldn't say my faith was super personal, it's more like me praying at God, me reading the Bible, so I didn't feel guilty for not reading the Bible, kind of thing, And it wasn't like I didn't take it seriously or didn't believe. It was just it was more like a ritual than an experience, And that all kind of shifted for me one day. I was 13 years old, heading down to a basketball game, Big Bear Lake in Southern California, where I grew up. And I remember looking out over the lake, and at that time I hated to run. Even though I was good at it, I would run the mile in PE and do really well. My dad would always tell me, he's like, you can be a great runner if you want to, but the desire has to come from you. And I didn't have the desire at all until that moment when I was 13, looking out over the lake. I felt like God just kind of planted a little seed of desire inside me and inspired me to try and run around the lake. So the following Saturday, my dad and we went out for a very long and slow 15-mile run around the lake, and I remember collapsing in the couch and what I'd say for the second time in my life, feeling like God was like speaking to my heart and telling me that one day I'd run with the best guys in the world, but he gave me that gift so I could help other people. And, I spent the next 20 years going after that. I went from a kid who hated to run to a kid who like was so focused on running. All my friends changed, how the things that are important to me in my life changed. I started training like crazy. I got very disciplined with my nutrition and sleep and all that stuff. And I was like going after this vision I felt like God had given me. And I'm so glad he gave me that vision, because there was a lot of tough times along the way, a lot more hard times for me than really good times. And it was during those really hard times that I'd have to reflect back on that vision and be like, have I done what I know God has told me I'm going to do? And if the answer is no, I got to pick myself up out of this and keep moving forward.
Wow. So let's back all the way up to that first run.
Yeah.
We start off in the 5K challenge with a 60-second run. You started off with 15 miles. Tell me how that felt.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it. No, it was painful. I had literally my basketball shoes on. So by the time I finished this run, my feet were all blistered up and I was exhausted. Like, we had to stop like quite a bit during that run. It took forever. My dad was a runner already at the time, so he was probably just bored out of his mind because we were going so slow. But he didn't tell me that. He was just encouraging me the whole way. But yeah, no, I wouldn't recommend a 15-mile run right out the gate, but I would recommend like listening to what God's put inside of you, and even more so like listen to the people that God's surrounded you with, And so like my dad, he's, like the closest person to me, and he could really tell that, hey, like this is something that he's feeling in his heart from God. And so rather than being like, no, you know what, we should just start with like a much shorter run, he's like, no, I'm a partner with what I see God doing in your life, and we're going to go do it together. So I would just encourage people, like, listen to God first, and then to the people that he surrounds you with as you're getting into the sport. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend a 15-mile run right out the gate.
So when did you realize, when was that aha moment that you knew running was going to be a big part of your life?
Yeah, so that moment when I collapsed on the couch, like that was it. That's where I really believe like I was going to be a world-class runner that one day. So I'm so glad that I have that, because what I've found is that you function, what comes out of you is what you believe about yourself. So that's why like now as a dad, like my number one priority is to get my kids to have a firm identity, to know who they are, and have it be rooted in something that's unshakable. Because from that moment, I believed I was going to run with the best guys in the world. So I acted that way. I trained that way. I took risks that way. Like when I was in high school, I remember doing an indoor mile race against Bernard Lagat, who was at the time, I think he was the second or third fastest human being to ever run the mile. And I'm on the start line with him, and I'm like 18 years old in high school. But like I went with him because I was just like, I'm supposed to run with the best guys in the world. That doesn't mean sitting back like a lap behind them, So I went with them the first 800 and then totally blew up, But that kind of belief and being able to take that kind of risk is what allowed me to get to that spot of running with the best guys in the world.
Wow. Yeah. We tell our kids a lot, and it may be a quote by somebody, I don't know, but you never know how far you can go until you go too far.
Yep.
And it sounds like that's the way you run sometimes is
Yep.
taking those risks. That's pretty telling. So I've done a little research. I knew some of these numbers, but I want you to help me explain something. And I had to look it up. You're currently the U.S. record holder for the half marathon with a 59:43. You're also the only American who's ever run under 2:05, but you're not the record holder at 2:05. How does that work?
Yeah, so when I ran 2:04:58, which is my fastest of all time, it was at the Boston Marathon in 2011. And they have all these rules and regulations about what makes a marathon record eligible. And so for Boston, it violates a couple of those regulations. One being you drop 400 feet. It's a net 400-foot drop from start to finish. And then the other one being it can't be point to point for the reason that it makes it so much better, because that day we had like an amazing tailwind. So it was like the opportunity of a lifetime to run a fast time. Actually, Bill Rogers, he told me previous to that race, he's like, like once every 10 years we get a wicked tailwind and you can really roll. And I'll never forget standing on the starting line in Hopkinton and looking up at the American flag, and it was just blowing the exact direction we're running. And I was like, I'm not letting 1 mile go by where I'm not pressing. Like I'm gonna see what I can do today. So it was a really cool experience. Even though it wasn't technically an American record, it's still, the 4th fastest time ever run at the Boston Marathon in 123 or 25 years that's been going on. And I'm still the fastest American to ever run that course as well. So there's so much history at Boston that
it's a shame it's not an American record. That's one of the probably most nostalgic.
Right. And it was a bit controversial because I was 4th in that race that day. But the guys who were 1, 2, they both were well under the world record, the current world record at the time. So there was a lot of kind of controversy there for a while of like, should it be eligible? Should it not? Because Boston definitely is not a fast course. Like, even though it's a net drop, like those hills, they hurt you a lot more than they help you.
Yeah.
So and I actually heard like rumblings recently that they're considering changing Boston to make it record eligible.
Oh, really?
I don't know. But to me, I had to shift my perspective of what competition is, growing up as a kid where you're surrounded by, it's like, how do you stack up next to everyone else? But I learned that was like a really unfulfilling way for me to do sports. But what I found is a really super fulfilling way for me to do sports is to go after personal excellence and just be like, I'm gonna be the best version of myself today. Like that's the only thing I can control. Right. I can't control how good I am today compared to a year ago or 5 years ago or tomorrow, but like I can get the most out of myself today. So I'd just be focused on like, I'm gonna do a great job with what I'm doing right now and look at it for what it is, on that day, and not be comparing it, as it is so easy for me to do, to previous years or, future years to come.
That's pretty telling that, athletes at your level, we kind of have a relationship with Gwen Jorgensen, and she says the same thing. She never makes goals based on outcome goals. She always makes process goals. Yeah. And it sounds like that's what you're saying is the process. Are you doing everything?
Yeah. And what I wrote about too in my book is about coming up with goals that are like heart goals. That's what I kind of shifted from. And it's crazy to see like how different I am now compared to when I was at Stanford, for example, and I had to count down till the Olympic Games, and every morning I'd get up and like take a day off, and I was doing it like 1,000 days out, Yeah. And I realized like, man, I'm putting so much pressure on one day, and I want to enjoy my life and not just have my whole life be revolving around this one day,
Yeah.
So, and also too, it's just very frustrating because you try and control things. You try and control how fit you get, how you're going to feel on race day. But like running is just a bit of a mystery. It's like some of my best races, I don't know why I felt so good, but I did, And some of the times when I was like, man, I was so fit, why didn't it click that day in the marathon? Like, I don't know. So you got to be like okay with a little bit of mystery there.
Yeah. So you made a few quotes through the years, and I want to ask you just about a few of these because they're very insightful, and I would like for you just to kind of go a little bit behind what you're thinking. And this is the one I told my son the other night, is you made the quote, how you define hard is going to determine how you experience hard. And from what I understand, you don't use that word very much, the word hard. Go a little deeper into that quote.
Yeah. So the kind of backstory behind that is like, as a kid when I was training, I remember I would feel like, man, I'm running 40 miles a week, and it felt like a ton, and I'm super tired. I'm like, I can't imagine running more than this. And then I'd hear about a guy like Dathan, who was my same year in high school, who was a future American record holder in the 5K and still running phenomenally. And I'd hear about him doing like 70 or 80 miles a week, and all of a sudden you're like, it's not that hard, So like your perception of what's hard changes based on what you're exposed to. Another example of this was after I retired from pro running, I signed up for this crazy challenge, 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 continents. And I didn't train for it at all. My longest run was 8 miles leading up to that. And I just run like 3 days a week. So my weekly mileage was probably like 20 miles a week. And I was training to run 100, or I was going to have to run 183 miles, I believe it is, in that week. And I was getting pretty nervous as the competition was getting closer and closer, but not nervous enough to actually train. I was like, no, I want to see how hard this can be, But I remember during that time, I got this book. It's called like Iron Cowboy. And this guy does 50 Ironman triathlons in 50 days in 50 states. And I was like, okay, 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 continents sounds hard, but relative to that, like it's nothing, like I can breeze through this. So it's amazing how the people that you surround yourself with can shape your perception of like what you think of as being hard training. Because when I'm training by myself, running like 40 miles a week, I felt like, whoa, I'm training so hard. Yeah. But then all of a sudden you put me with a group where everyone's running 70, 80, 90 miles a week. And it's just the new normal. It's like, I don't know, everyone just trains this way. So, but you got to give yourself grace too, because, it's a process for me where, my new normals were being reestablished, time after time after time. And it was a gradual stepping process. I didn't go from running 20 miles a week to 100 miles a week. It took years and years to build there. So you got to be patient with yourself too, and be like, okay, I can't just like not think this is going to be hard and then expect to be able to go out and run a marathon,
Yeah.
So you got to embrace the process.
So you talked about, I've actually got it down here later, but we'll go ahead and park there now. The 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents. What were you thinking?
Yeah, so it's funny. It was kind of full circle for me. And that was kind of the bookend of my career. I'd already retired from running professionally, but the way things ended, it just didn't go how I was hoping it would go. I always pictured like running my last marathon, having it be a really good marathon, getting down on my knees at the finish line, taking off my shoes and walking away barefoot. And I never had that opportunity. I never got to say goodbye to it. So it kind of felt like an open chapter of my life that, wasn't totally closed. Until one day I was doing some weights because I got into weightlifting after I retired from pro running. And I got a text message from Pastor Matthew Barnett, who's my friend. He's the pastor at the Dream Center in Los Angeles. And I just love the work that they're doing down there at the Dream Center, helping people get off the streets in Los Angeles. And he's like, hey, I'm doing this crazy race, 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 continents. And you just tell me about it and how crazy it's going to be. And I was like, there's something about it. There's very similar to the moment when I was 13 and had that vision to try and run around the lake, where something about that just grabbed me. And so I texted him right back. I was like, oh man, that sounds amazing. Like, let me know. And the running didn't sound amazing, but just like the whole experience and traveling around the world in a week. And there's something and the epic challenge of it, usually we run 2 marathons a year, and that's like a lot, So the thought of doing 7 back to back to back was just like, whoa, this would be intense, But there's something just grabbed me. And so I texted him back. He's like, hey, let me know if you want company. And he texted right back. He's like, yeah, you should totally come. And things just kind of took off from there. And it was an interesting week, having not trained for it at all. I was actually getting in better shape as the week was going on. So we started our first day in Antarctica, and we were moving all over the world. And day 5 in Morocco was actually my fastest race. I believe it was like 3:04 or something like that.
Wow.
And then I got a stress reaction that day, though. And so my next 2 marathons I ran with a stress reaction in my hip. So my last marathon in Sydney was like 5.5 hours and super long, super painful, very similar to the 15-mile run around the lake. Really, lots of stops involved, and it was a big struggle just to make it to the finish line. But I'll never forget finally making it to the finish in Sydney and getting down on my knees, taking my shoes off just like I'd always pictured doing, even though it wasn't really a good race for me, taking my shoes off, walking away. And it felt like that was like a clear kind of end to that season of my life, and kind of launched me into this new season of life of being an author, focusing on being a good dad, a good husband, and also doing some coaching in Flagstaff, Arizona now. So I kind of learned that what you experience and learn in one season of life is meant to be pulled into the next season of life. So it's really neat to see like all of that stuff wasn't just for me to experience, but it's for me to take and then now to like give it back out to other people and help and encourage other people.
Yeah. So you started your career and you ended your career with epic runs. Basically.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. What you believe about yourself is going to determine where you go in life.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of goes back to that moment when I was 13 and I believed that I'd run with the best guys in the world. Having that belief, like I couldn't help it but to let it come out. And I think about like how often maybe there's certain behaviors of mine that I don't like and that I want to change. And I'm just so focused on like avoiding that behavior or trying to clean that behavior up rather than like addressing the heart and like what's actually going on inside of here that's making me act this way. It's always a temptation for me to be like, I'm just going to address like what's physically going on, but really like, and I think Jesus taught this, like everything flows out of our heart. He was all about our heart and us getting clean on the inside. So that's just like a very foundational belief that I've always had is, and the question I like to ask myself, like, what am I believing about myself in this moment? Because I believe beliefs aren't like a one-time thing. Like, yes, I had the one-time belief when I was 13, but it takes cultivation of those beliefs. It's a daily, like monotonous, like every single day being like, I'm choosing to believe this. I don't feel like believing this today because I'm going through X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to choose this belief and I'm going to hang on to it and I'm going to cultivate it. I'm going to let it grow.
It's kind of like that run you just don't want to get up and do.
Yeah. And we all have those days.
It's crazy. When I could get outside of myself, I was much better at managing pain.
Yeah, I like to describe my job as a professional pain manager when I was running professionally, because that's really the name of the game, right? It's like how hard can you push yourself and how hard can you push your body? And what I found is in my moments of most excruciating pain that I've experienced, whether it be mile 20 of Boston or, en route to running 2:06 for the marathon in London, I would be in extreme pain and I'd become very like internal and I'm just focused so much on my own pain, my own suffering. And then my perception of my own pain increases. And so I had to find a way to get my focus off of me and put it onto someone else. Because when I was focused on someone else, I wasn't thinking about my pain. I was thinking about how much I love this other person. So oftentimes, we have a lead vehicle in front of us and there'd be a cameraman on the back of it. And I'd literally be staring at this camera and thinking about like Sarah, my wife, who's watching me, or my little brother who's watching me at home, and I think about how much I love them and how much they've invested in me for this moment. And it was my love for them that I was going to push through this pain because it just allowed me to get outside myself. And there's lots of different ways I could go about doing that. Like I remember very vividly in 2009, the New York City Marathon is having a really bad race for, I don't know why reason. It was totally mysterious, back in like 16th place at mile like 15 into the race and just pouting to God, and being like, oh, I'm so frustrated. Why is this happening? Like, I don't understand what's going on. And but then I remembered why I was running, and that was the first race I ran for the Hall Steps Foundation, which we had just started. And so every single dollar was going to go towards projects of alleviating poverty all over the world. And I was like, this is why I'm out here. And like my mind flashed back to my previous trip to Zambia and seeing the kids in tattered clothes and how we were able to bring clean water to them, through a group of people running for Team World Vision at the Chicago Marathon. And I was like, this is why I'm out here. And it allowed me to get outside myself. My body physically relaxed and I started to perform a lot better. So also too, I think Jesus did the same thing. It says that he endured the cross for the joy set before him. And I think about like, well, what was that joy that Jesus was set on, And I think, it doesn't say in the Bible what it is, but I think it was me, it was you, it was everyone. Yeah. So I think that's the way to get through our moments of greatest struggle, greatest physical pain, is to set our love and affection on someone else.
Yeah. So you, and we're not going to go all the way through these quotes, but you talk a lot about the mental side of the sport. You know, I had a opportunity several years ago to attempt to run a 100-mile treadmill run. And long story short, I didn't make it through the whole thing. I had a stress fracture. But I called a friend of mine when I accepted the challenge. It was kind of one of those, like your pastor friend. It was a buddy of mine, almost a dare. And I sure. But I called a friend of mine who does a lot of these ultra distance races, and I said, Jeff, can I do that? He said, if you can run a marathon, you can run 100 miles. Yeah. As long as you think you can. Yeah. And you talk about, I mean, a lot of your quotes and a lot of things I've heard you talk about is the mental side of the sport. How important on a scale is the mental side versus physical?
Ooh, that's a great question. You know, you got to have both, you know? It's like, especially, it depends on what your goals are. Like if your goal is to survive something, you can survive a lot of things just off mental strength alone. Like me, for example, my 7 marathons, like I could get through it because like I was strong up here, but I wasn't gonna be running 2:20 marathons. Like physically, it wasn't there. It wasn't in the cards. So you got to have both, you know, and the two affect each other. Like we're a holistic person with mind, body, spirit, and all of that is just like, you can't separate one, you know? So yeah, I'd say it depends on what your goals are. But what I found for myself is like, I just learned that like, I can't focus too far down the road. Like there's this great Dietrich Bonhoeffer quote that I just love. And he talks about like, I don't look at the road far in front of me that's too hard for me. I look at Jesus who's right in front of me and I say, he leads the way, I will follow. And I would reflect back on that quote all the time because I would get overwhelmed by the challenge. And I can imagine like if you're trying to do 100 miles on a treadmill and you're at mile like 24 and you're hurting, being like this isn't physically possible. Like your mind would just convince you of that over time, right? But the truth of the matter is like you can take one more step. Unless you have a stress fracture, then maybe it's better to step off the treadmill, you know? Yeah. And there's a time and place for that, you know? Like I stepped out of the Olympic Games in 2012 and God was telling me like, live to fight another battle another day. So I think you do have to be smart with your mind. You know, it's not just about like drilling your body into the ground into submission every single time. It's more about like partnering with your body. But so on the starting line of marathons, I was always like freaking out on the inside because I'm thinking about how hard it's going to be at mile 23, 24, 25. And what I have to tell myself all the time is the title of my new book, Run the Mile You're In. And I would just tell myself, just do a great job with what you're doing right now. Like the grace is here for this moment. It's not here for mile 23 yet. Like it'll be there when I get there, but let me just do a great job with what I'm doing right now. Be fully present in this moment and try and maximize what I'm doing. And I'll worry about that part when I get there. Because it's really the worry about the struggle and the thing that you're trying to take on that's worse than actually going through it, you know? Yeah. So
that's pretty telling. Yeah. Before we move on from the mental side, because I love the mental side of running, I coach a group of junior triathletes and some of them race at the elite level. And what I tell them is when you show up for these races, everybody's fast. Everybody wants it. It's who's willing to hurt the most. And you mentioned a while ago, you call yourself a professional pain manager. Explain in your own words what that means in the moment, in the race, to want it more than the guy running next to you.
I think as a professional pain manager, you have to have a whole bunch of different tools you can pull on. Because sometimes I'll try one thing, like thinking about other people, trying to love them, focus on that, and it won't work. And I'm like, okay, I need to go to something else, you know? And so other things I would go to is just like, I'll literally visualize myself back in training because that helps me relax and take pressure off what I'm currently feeling, you know? So sometimes that would work. If that didn't work, another tool that I do all the time is just try and turn my brain off. I would just tell myself simple things. I'm like, just put one foot in front of the other as fast as you can. And like literally try not to think at all. Like I remember hearing an interview with Michael Phelps and they were asking him, what do you think about when you're in the pool? He's like, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just in the moment going, you know? And sometimes like our mind, we just need to quiet it down and totally turn it off. So, and you learn these tools and what works well for you, because, you know, what works for me might be a little bit different than what works for you, but you learn this in training. You know, you put yourself in those situations where you are suffering and you got to figure out how you're going to get through this moment. You shouldn't let that moment only come in a race, because then, you know, what you haven't done in practice, you're not going to be able to magically pull it out of your hat on race day. So it's just something where you should just be aware of that. Like, well, what is it for me that works for me when I'm suffering? What motivates me to get through those moments, and try a lot of different things and have like 5 or 6 different tactics that you're going to go to. Like when I'm suffering, I'm going to try this. If that doesn't work, I'm going to go to this and this and this and this. And, yeah, eventually something will work.
That's awesome. Yeah. So your wife, Sarah, is also a pretty good runner.
Yeah.
Is that how you guys met?
Yeah. So Sarah and I met, it was actually at the California State Meet our senior year in high school. And I had run a race early in the morning, won my race, and I had some kids come up and ask for my autograph afterwards. So I signed my name, put my favorite Bible verse underneath it. Later in the day, Sarah runs, wins her race. Same kids come up with the same piece of paper, ask for her autograph. So she saw my name, which was amazing that she could even read it, because I was just like scribbling it, you know. And she saw I put a Bible verse underneath, and so she's like, oh, this guy's a Christian. And so she got my email from a mutual friend and emailed me just to encourage me in my faith. And we're both like California runners and Christians. And so we kind of have that in common. And then we met the next week at the Foot Locker Championships, actually the Western Regional Championships, and just kind of kept in touch. And then both decided to go to Stanford, and then started dating first week of freshman year, dated all the way through college, and got married 3 months after we graduated from Stanford, and have been together nearly 14 years now.
Wow. Now she's got a few big races coming up. She's, Tell me a little bit about her career.
Yeah, it's been really fun to see Sarah grow. She came to the marathon, I don't know, I mean, it was like 5 years ago, somewhere right in there. And
she was a middle distance runner.
She's competed in every Olympic trial since 2004, but always in a different event. So I believe in 2004 is the 5K, and then she moved up to like the steeplechase, and then she did 1500 one year, and then the marathon this last time around, and then she tried again in the 10K on the track.
So she did it right. She didn't do the 12 miles around the lake.
No, yeah, exactly. She's gradually worked her way up, but it's been fun to see her just kind of steadily improve. You know, like I think her first marathon in Chicago, it was right around 2:32 or somewhere right in that range. I don't remember exactly what it is. And now she's just been, every marathon she just gets a little bit stronger, and ran 2:26 about a year ago in Ottawa, and is looking really good. You know, like the women's running scene is really good in the U.S. right now. So we have our Olympic trials coming up February 29th in Atlanta. So we're actually heading to Atlanta tonight. We're going to get on the course for the first time tomorrow morning. She's going to preview the course. But, you know, the goal is to make an Olympic team. It'd be her first Olympics, and it would just, you know, it'd be a really nice way to end her career. Not that she'll be done for sure, but, you know, we're both 36 right now. And so, you know, women tend to age a little bit better than guys. I think it's because they listen to their body more than guys.
They don't run 12 miles.
Yeah, exactly. So she's got some exciting stuff, exciting goals, but you know, kind of like what we're talking about, it's better to like have goals that you know you can accomplish every time, like goals of the heart, or focusing on the process. And she's loving the process.
Right.
There is power in people's stories.
What I did need and what I was begging for was a relationship that I didn't know that I needed, and only God could give it to me.
I started hearing all these stories that just made me realize this was the right move. I'm here to give these people hope through what Christ can do in their life.
Your story can help encourage others around the country, just like these stories have. You can walk through a simple process of sharing your story with the Big Share app. Download the Big Share app in your app store to start sharing hope with others.
Okay, we are back, and wow. How about that interview? And that's only half of it. That's the amazing part, right?
The thing that impresses me most about Ryan is he's a great storyteller.
Yes, he is.
I've said that several times since that interview. He just, a funny thing about this video, I think the overall video or the overall interview is about an hour. And our goal was that we wanted to get that interview done in 30 minutes. And I'll never forget, we sat down with Ryan and we went through the whole interview, and we got done, and I asked the guys filming, I said, was that 30 minutes? And they said, no, that was an hour. But it didn't feel like it because he's just so engaging, and he's a great storyteller. So I think everybody's going to agree. Everybody's going to love the second part of this interview just as much as they did the first.
Yeah, you can tell it comes straight from his heart because it just pours right out.
Yeah, and he's told these stories once or twice before.
I'm
you
sure.
Can tell. Yeah,
I'm sure. It's interesting how an Olympian gets his start. On day one, he goes and he runs this crazy distance. Can you imagine that happening? I mean, isn't that crazy?
It goes against everything we teach.
That's exactly.
We talk about too much too soon. Don't skip ahead. Start with that 60-second run, and he goes out and he runs 15 miles around a lake. So for all of you listening out there, and maybe you've never run before, don't do what Ryan Hall did. That's important.
It turns out he was an Olympian, so it turned out okay for him.
It turned out okay, yeah.
But the odds are that it won't turn out well.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because I think sometimes it's easy for us to hold people back from doing things because we think, oh, it's too much, or it's a little outside the box. I think sometimes even just doing something different that nobody's ever done before, people are a little reluctant to do those things. This is kind of one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
He also talked about running 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents.
I've thought about that a lot, and think about the logistics behind that. I mean, obviously he said they had a private jet, but just think about the logistics of just trying to pull that off. I mean, obviously they had an organization that did that, but that seems insane to me.
Yeah. But fun. Really, really a cool thing to be a part of. And it's interesting that he didn't train for it so that it was similar to that first run that he took.
Yeah. And, I one thing that gets me is that first marathon, it seems like it would be easy. Not easy. It's still a marathon. But the second one, a little bit harder. But by the time you get to that third, fourth, fifth, you've got to think that everybody that was doing it, not only Ryan, that they're so insanely sore by that second or third day that I would think the mental game is harder than the actual races themselves, because they're waking up thinking, oh, man, I don't know if I can do this. I got to do this again.
Yeah. And not only that, but the sleep that they're getting is on an airplane. And probably in a place that's not that comfortable.
Yeah,
and hard to do.
You got everybody smelling on there probably. Everybody's doing these marathons, so even after bathing, after that much sweating, it's got to be. But I mean, the mental fortitude there that those guys had to do that is just really impressive.
Yeah, it really is. And he talks a lot about the mental game, and he talks about the personal excellence, and you realize really quickly in listening to him that he's got it together upstairs as far as his thoughts go.
Absolutely.
He picks a direction, and when he goes in that direction, he's got blinders on. He's not paying attention to anything out here. It's boom.
And I think that's the reason I really tried to dig in on the mental side, because it is so important. It's important in not only sport, but also in our walk with Christ. There's all these naysayers, there's all these negative thoughts, there's all these negative pressures that say you can't do this or you don't need to do this. And with sport and our walk with Christ, it's learning how to cope with that and to get through that to the other side. And yeah, he's just a really impressive guy. I'm so glad we were able to get him on.
Yeah, and that personal excellence and that whole idea of personal excellence extends not only to your Christian walk, but also to your job, to raising your kids, to all the things in life. It just makes a difference.
Yeah.
And I think about myself, and I think about my running career and the times when I was much more accomplished, when I was running much faster, and the things that I learned in trying to train through, and the experiencing failure and triumph, and going, it's just so valuable to us.
Absolutely.
To be runners.
Yeah.
He talked about focusing on what we can control and not focusing on what we can't. Isn't that so hard? Well, as Christians, we struggle with that
Well,
one.
and how relevant is that? How relevant is that today?
Man.
Today, with the coronavirus and everything that's going on, there's so many things that are out of our control. The government is shutting things down. We're having to worship from home. Kids aren't going to school. Just yesterday in our state of Georgia, they canceled the schools for the rest of the year. And there's so many things that are out of our control that we've got to latch on to what we can control. You know, what is my family and I doing tonight?
Yeah.
What are we cooking tonight? If you focus on those things that you can control, because it's easy to get overwhelmed, especially when you turn the news on. It's very easily to get overwhelmed by the things that we can't control. So he was spot on. I mean, and it's so relevant for today.
Yeah, there's only one thing on the news right now. I mean, if you turn on the news, there's nothing else there.
Right.
And it's incredible.
It is.
To see how our world has changed so much in a month.
And in 3 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I was talking on a couple episodes ago how we were in Sarasota and Lane's race got canceled, and I was so disappointed. And it's, you know, I've told you, Dean, it's my thoughts about this whole coronavirus, how quickly they've changed in 3 weeks. Because 3 weeks ago, I'll be honest, I thought it was a little bit ridiculous what we're doing. And now I see that, you know, there were some people out there that they really knew what they were talking about, and they could see this wave coming. And I'm glad that they saw that and kind of pulled us all back as a society. And I think it's good. I think there's so much good come out. There's a lot of bad that has happened. People have lost their jobs. Schools have been canceled, but there's a lot of good that has come out of this.
That's one of my favorite things about living in this country is when we get our backs against the wall as a country, we tend to focus on the right things for the most part.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is getting back to our faith. I've seen a lot of folks who have turned back to, you know, I've kind of dropped the ball on my faith and my journey, and I need to pick that ball back up.
Yeah, and look what's happened. I mean, I'm guilty. I watch the president's press conferences just about every night because I think we should. I think we need a little bit of it to stay informed. But
we do.
Think about what he's been saying and what governors of some other states have been saying. They've been complimenting each other.
Right.
Arch rivals just a month ago.
Right.
And how the president is complimenting the governor of this state, and the governor of this state is complimenting the president. That's one of those good things.
Yes, it is.
You know, our political leaders have learned something here. I hope they've learned something.
I hope it sticks.
I hope it sticks. But that is a breath of fresh air.
It is.
No matter which side of the aisle you're on, that's good to see.
It is.
And it's encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we head back to running and we think, you mentioned several quotes that Ryan had uttered in the past. And I really like this first one. And the quote was, how you define hard is going to determine how you experience hard, meaning running hard.
Yeah. Isn't there a lot of truth there?
There is a lot of truth there. And I'll never forget, you came to me after that interview, and I wasn't there during that interview, but you came to me afterwards, and that really particularly struck you as, how do you think, he doesn't use the word hard. The word hard is not in his vocabulary because he thinks that's a bad word. And I get it. It's an interesting thought. And
it's what's amazing about it is a lot of times it's who you surround yourself with. You know, he talked about, when he was running, I think he talked about running 30, 40 miles a week, and he thought that was hard. That was a lot until he put himself in a different atmosphere, and he was running a lot more than that. And so he looked back, and 30, 40 miles a week didn't seem so hard. And how many times do we do that in our 5K classes? We get to that week 8, we talked about Denise several weeks back saying, I can't do this. This is hard. When does running get easier? Well, all you got to do is look back a little bit and see that what you thought was hard then isn't now, and what you think hard is now is not going to be here in a few more weeks. And so a lot of wisdom there.
Absolutely. And, there may be a lot of people out there kind of like me. Running was a lot easier for me at one time.
Right.
But as I get older, that perception changes in the opposite direction. Of course, Ryan's not old enough to see it change in the opposite direction yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea of running hard is different today than it was to me just 5 years ago.
And it's all relative.
It is.
It is. Yeah.
It is. But you got to accept that too.
You do.
It's where you are in life.
My body keeps telling me that. You need to just accept you're getting older. I'm looking at the glasses on your head right now. I've got a pair of those now.
Yeah.
And
welcome to the club.
I didn't want to accept that, but when I put a pair on, I realized, I need to accept this fact that I need readers now.
His second quote was, "What you learn in one season of life is meant to be pulled into the next season." Golly, that's how often do we go through tough times and then later on we realize, that's why I went through that.
Mm-hmm. Hindsight's 20/20.
It is. I see people. You see. I think about that in the context of today and where we are today too, where I've seen a lot of people argue that young folks today, have never seen hard times, and when you think about it, you realize, they really haven't. And, everybody, there are families that have seen tough times. There are certainly people, and we're not saying that there's nobody out there who's ever seen a tough day in their life.
Right.
But what is tough is relative, just like we were just talking about. And I've talked with those people who went through the Depression, who went through war, who went through the stock market crashes, and just all these crazy things that they've been through. Some of those young folks are getting to see just a taste of that kind of thing today.
Yeah, and you pull it on down to our running life, and we had a workout the other day and with the triathlon team, and one of our athletes just had a dismal workout, and that athlete just happened to be my son Lane. And on the way home, I said, and he was beating himself up, and just he takes bad workouts. He doesn't take them very well. And I said, did you learn something? And he's like, yeah. And he just started ranting on about this and that. I'll never do that. And I said, then it was a good workout because you learned something.
Yeah.
And we learn from those experiences, not only in life, but as athletes as well. You're famous for making the quote, if you don't have the bad days, you have nothing compared to the good ones too. Yeah. And, that's so true. So, a season of life can be workout to workout.
It can be.
And
day to day. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's another one. What you believe about yourself is going to determine where you go in life.
And that's a great quote.
As parents, we really want to drill that one into kids, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jesus, he points out, rightly so, and I love the way Ryan continuously goes back to an example in the Bible and all of his answers. It's great to see. But he talks about how Jesus teaches us that everything flows out of the heart.
Right.
And so what we believe about ourselves is important for that reason.
And in these days, I hate to keep going back to these days, but we're seeing that kind of in real life right now. People are being squeezed.
Yeah.
And what are we seeing come out?
Yeah.
And that's the truest testament of who you are at your core is what is coming out in these days. When you're upset because your race gets canceled, or you're upset because the grocery store's out of toilet paper, or are you giving grace, or are you lashing out? And if you find yourself lashing out, and I've been guilty too, but I hope that God hits us right then.
Yeah.
And we get that conviction and we say, that's not what I want coming out. That's not what I've professed to believe. That's not how I've portrayed myself. And I hope that we make that change right then.
Yeah.
Because we're all getting squeezed right now.
We are. And I don't know why it's so hard sometimes and it's different for different people. For some people, it's really hard to believe in themselves. Mm-hmm. For other people, some people have an overabundance of confidence.
Yeah.
I've been charged with that before.
Yeah.
But why is it so difficult, do you think, for people to believe in themselves?
Confidence is one of those, we talk to the kids a lot. I say there's a fine line between confidence and cockiness. Mm-hmm. I think we should have confidence. We should have confidence in who we are and who we put our faith in. Mm-hmm. But that line can easily be crossed into cockiness. Yeah. And a lot of times it just depends on where you're pointing. Are you pointing at me? Are you pointing at self? Are you giving the credit to God?
Yeah.
And to me, a lot of times that is where confidence meets cockiness, is what you do in those two situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we can see ourselves the way God sees us,
yeah,
it makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
When I could get outside of myself, I was much better at managing pain.
Yeah.
That was maybe the most revolutionary thing that he said to me. It was so odd because I'm an internal guy when it comes to pain.
And pain magnifies that.
It does.
It makes you look even more and more and more at, I hurt. I need to do this. And I think what he's saying there is if we can get outside, he talks about doing math. I've heard different people talk about doing different things when it starts hurting bad to get our focus off the pain, but that's hard to do. I've never run like you and some other guys do. I've never been an elite runner in my past. When it starts hurting really bad, I back it down. But to be at the level you're at or you've been at and Ryan's at, you've got to learn to break through that. And I don't know what you think about it, but I thought it was a great quote.
Well, I thought this whole idea of being a professional pain manager was interesting because that really is what you're doing.
It is.
And it really is a difficult thing to do because the further you go and the more it hurts, the louder that voice in your head is screaming at you. You're going to need to stop. You're going to need to slow down. And you're yelling back at it. No, I'm not. And it's a serious battle.
And I think if you're listening to this and pain is something you want to learn more about, I think here in a few weeks you're going to have a special guest on, and that's what you're going to be talking about on the Facebook Live.
Yeah,
you're going to be talking about pain.
Yep.
Or maybe that guest has already been on. I'm not sure by the time we were recording this. I'm getting a little bit confused here.
Yeah, actually, he's already been on.
He's already been on. So
yes.
So go back to the Facebook group, the Run Club Facebook group. Sorry, folks. But really, you guys are talking about how to get through pain,
right? Because that's so important to run. It depends on what you want out of running too. Yeah. If you just want to have fun with running, then that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to be the fastest runner you can be, you're going to need to learn how to deal with pain.
Absolutely.
And I love the way that he says, hey, Jesus, and it says in the Bible, Jesus endured the cross for the joy that was set before him. Mm-hmm. It puts a whole different spin on pain, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you can focus on, we've told the kids before, look back at workouts and look at the times where you broke through and think about how you felt once you broke through, because the exhilaration of breaking through pain and reaching that goal far outweighs the pain of quitting.
Yep.
There's a quote we use there, and I can't even remember the quote right now, but the pain of success is always greater than the pain of the workout or the regret.
Yep.
Yep. So yeah, but it's hard to think about that when you're in the thick of it.
Oh, it is. But I think about it from time to time. I'll tell you, I've had other things too. When I know somebody's watching, like as a coach now, if I know there's somebody, last year I was doing this 10K on the track last year. I knew that halfway through that I wasn't going to run that well, mm-hmm. and I could have just kind of mailed it in the rest of the way. Still would have finished in the same place I finished in, but I knew that there was an athlete there that I coach who was watching me. Mm-hmm. I couldn't give up.
Yeah,
I had to keep going.
Yeah,
and I like when I get that opportunity, I see that athlete break through, and I like to look into their eyes and say, I want you to think about how you feel right now. And I want you to remember how you feel right now, because you're going to need that.
Yeah.
It's neat. And he talked about both the mental and the physical side. I think you asked him about which one was more important, or which one do you focus on more, or whatever it was. And he talked about how it depends on your goals, which I think is completely 100% dead on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it depends on the person too. You know, some people have it together mentally. There's people out there that think they can do anything, and so they don't struggle as much with the mental side. It's the physical. There's people out there that think they can do it, and we all know they can't. There's people out there that think they can't, and we all know they can. So I think it depends on which side of the aisle you're on there. But yeah, it takes the perfect blend of having the physical ability and the mental fortitude at whatever task it is. Not just
That's true.
running, but you know, if I think that I can get that job and I have the credentials to do it, then chances are that I've got a lot better chance of getting that job, as opposed to if I go into that job interview and I'm thinking I'm not going to get this job. You know, who was it said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right?
Henry Ford,
wasn't
it?
Yeah, I think that quote's been attributed to a few people, but
Yeah.
whoever said it's dead on.
Yeah.
It's how you view yourself going into whatever it is you're doing.
You know the way I always put it? I always said, when I was a kid, my mother told me I could do anything.
Exactly.
And I believed her.
Yeah.
So,
and you still do to this day.
I still believe I can do anything, even though I can't.
Right.
Like jump over fences.
Like jumping over a fence.
He talked about how there's different tools in the toolbox, and it was interesting to hear him talk about how he manages his pain, and sometimes he focuses on the camera in front of him and thinks about how much he loves that person or whatever, which I thought was really fascinating. What I do is, even today, if I'm out there and I'm out on the road and I'm having a hard time, I'll do one of two things. I'll either start by calling myself ugly names and just getting all over myself and saying, just pick it up. You're just a wimp. And I'll just call myself up. Or if that doesn't work, then I go to, you're awesome. You know you can do this. And I go back and forth. Whichever one works that day, I'll use that one.
I typically stick to the first idea. I'm on myself pretty hard, especially when it's a workout and you're thinking, man, there's nobody on the track right now. I can cut this workout short. And, man, I will really give myself down the road about that, because, yeah, you can't let yourself fall into that trap.
That's right.
You can't.
Yep. So we hope that you enjoyed the first half of Ryan's interview. There will be a second half coming up next week. We also want to talk about becoming a Run for God coach. You know, right now is a hard time for our Run for God coaches. There's a lot of them out there. Some of them are doing some things online through Facebook Live and other ways of communicating with their groups. But of course, that kind of defeats a little bit of the purpose of our program, the 5K Challenge, because part of that is the people meeting together and sharing their experience.
Accountability.
You can still do that online, though.
Absolutely.
There are things that you can do. A lot of folks don't like to get behind a camera. I can tell you, we didn't like getting behind a camera for a while either.
Right.
It gets a little easier each time. So
yeah, and it's amazing how everybody is latching on and learning more about this technology. And I don't think it's any coincidence that we're sitting here doing this podcast right now. We just a few weeks ago finished up the 5K Challenge podcast, which, by the way, for you coaches out there, and if you're considering becoming a coach, take advantage of that. Use that 5K podcast. If you're not completely comfortable teaching the curriculum, you know, you and I and Ted sat down and we walked participants through the whole 5K Challenge on a podcast. And the podcast is absolutely free out there. You can go and listen to it. You can get the materials at runforgod.com. But it's like God knew there was something coming up and we were going to need this technology. And here we are today. We're limited to 10 or a few people now. And so this technology is really coming in handy right now.
God's timing. God's timing.
Absolutely.
Yep. Hey, we will see you next week with part 2 of the Ryan Hall interview. We look forward to that. Until then, shine your light from wherever you are planted.
Good job, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.